Okay, guys, back for part 5, chapter 19. Thursday, 11:32 p.m. Xander and David's late-night conversations had become habit. It helped both of them process the day's events and plans for tomorrow. So this night, like the other two before, they faced each other in the motel bed. "Do you miss Danielle?" David whispered. "Of course." "Well, maybe you'll find a new girlfriend." "I doubt it. Maybe you will." David smiled. A year ago, he would have protested that no such thing would ever happen, not in 1,000 years. They fell silent. Their parents breathed. Something ticked. "I don't think Dad saw us," David said. "No," Xander agreed. An hour after they had stepped back into the corridor from the school, Dad had returned home. If he had seen them peering at him from the windows in the doors, he had not let on. He had simply gone about organizing the rest of his upstairs exploration. Both of his sons said they could handle it and had urged him to find something else to do. He had wandered off, moping theatrically. By the time it became too dark to continue, Mom had made short work of the kitchen and Butler's pantry. That's what she called the small room with cabinets and counters between the kitchen and the dining room. Toria had proclaimed her room ready for furniture and decorations. Dad had walked the grounds, finding nothing in particular of interest, and the boys had finished the second floor investigation. They were all so wiped out. Toria suggested turning off the television midway through America's Funniest Home Videos. Despite its ranking as their favorite show, everyone had agreed. But now, an hour later, the brothers were wide awake, sharing their thoughts. David whispered, "Do you think the closet's the only place that moves you from one place to another?" "One place like that in the whole world is enough," Xander said. Then he thought about how his father had seemed to instantly shift from the dining room to another part of the house when they had first been there. "I think there might be other spots like that in the house. We just haven't found them." "Yet," said David. "I was thinking, what if the spots come and go? I mean, I saw that in a movie once. These portals move around. Once it was in a phone booth, another time in the bathroom of a Chinese restaurant. Same portal, moving around. Well, that would suck." "Yeah, what if you're taking a shower and suddenly you're standing in the middle of a football field at halftime? Naked?" "Shh," Xander nodded. He could tell David was thinking about it. "Ooh, that would really suck," his brother decided. "I don't think it could happen." "Well, why not? With the closet and the locker, you know what to do to make it work. You step in and shut the door. In the middle of the field, what would you do to return?" David made a sour face. "Maybe you don't." "Well, that tells you something, doesn't it?" "Well, like what?" "Like, we don't know anything about what we're dealing with. It could be dangerous. So, should we tell Mom and Dad?" Toria popped up from the side of the bed nearest David. "Tell them what?" The boys screamed in whispers. "Toria, go back to bed," Xander said. "Tell Mom and Dad what?" "That David feels like throwing up." "Ugh." And she was back in the rollaway before Xander realized she was gone. "And no," Xander said, almost touching David's nose with his finger. "Don't tell them. Not yet." David didn't respond for a minute, and then he said, "You know how when we got back from the school, we checked the rest of the second floor and closed closet doors with one of us in it? Shouldn't we go back and do that to the rest of the house?" "I guess." "Well, what about the basement?" "Everywhere." Xander knew what David was thinking. They'd both been surprised when nothing turned up down there. Now they were going to go give it another chance. He thought of all the rooms down there, all the doors, lots of places to hide a portal. And if there was any correlation between the connected places, the relative brightness and friendliness of the linen closet and the school, where might a portal be in the dark, creepy basement lead? He whispered, "We need to stick together," David said. David said nothing. His eyes were closed. "David?" A slight snore. "Good night, Day," Xander said and rolled over. Chapter 20. Friday, 11:17 a.m. The power came on with a pop, pop, pop. Xander was standing at the top of the stairs on the second floor landing when an electric light flared out from the big entryway chandelier. Then 3 bulbs exploded, one after another. "They're on," he called. Several lamps in the upstairs corridor came to life as well. One of them blazed bright and went out. The master bedroom suite was down the hall on the opposite side of the house from the kids' bedrooms. Dad hurried out of there now, his eyes surveying the corridor's ceiling lamps. Down the hall and in the other direction, David came out of their bedroom. Lights on here too, he said. Dad, I see. Oh, Dad said, I see. Xander pointed. Some lights just blew out in the chandelier. Dad nodded as he descended the stairs, two at a time. Old wiring, plus water and rodent damage, dirt in the sockets. I'm going to throw the breakers until we know it's safe. "Aw," David moaned. "It won't be long," Dad said, and he disappeared into the corridor under the boys, heading for the kitchen and the basement stairs. Smoke coiled up from the blown bulbs in the chandelier. "Cool," David said. Xander elbowed him. "That's not cool." He headed towards their bedroom with a bucket of sudsy water. Dad had said their furniture was arriving in the afternoon, and if they wanted to see their room, it had to be clean first. David followed him into the bedroom. They had positioned their flashlights on the floor and dresser to illuminate the areas they were cleaning. David had apparently dropped the broom when the lights came on. He picked it up now and began sweeping a pile of dust towards the door. Xander sat the bucket down by one of the windows. He pulled a washcloth out of the water and lathered up the glass. The windows and frames were so filthy, glass cleaner and paper towels simply didn't cut it. David said, "When are we going to go look for more portals?" "When we get a chance, I guess." David swept a big cloud into the hallway. Granules of dirt and other debris rained into the hardwood floor and linen closet on the other side of the hallway. He turned around, leaned on the broom handle, and said, "I thought we were going to do it today." Xander continued to inscribe big, soapy circles on the window. He said, "You want a bedroom, don't you?" "Yeah, but..." Xander had to smile. You thought putting your new room together would be the most excitement you'd have after we got here. "Yeah, I guess I was wrong," he said. He looked back through the door at the linen closet. Xander said, "Don't even think about it going in there on your own." "I'm not," he said. Xander didn't like the way he said it. Their bedroom faced the front of the house. As Xander wiped away the soap, he saw a big moving van pull up to the end of the road. Until now, Xander had lived in the same house, in the same room, his entire life. The room had been too small to be creative with the placement of furniture. The most they could do was swap the position of their bunk beds and dresser, change the posters on the walls, and alternate who got to sleep on top. The bedroom in their new house was huge. Xander had no idea how much fun simply arranging furniture could be. Using bunk beds to save floor space was no longer necessary. The boys quickly decided to have their own beds with no one above or below them. Each boy had wanted to put his bed in the tower. When argument got loud, Dad had ruled that neither of them could use it, so the tower became their homework and reading area, with a writing desk and a beanbag chair. They had voted to keep the dresser that was already in the room, as well as their old one from Pasadena. That way, each boy could have his own dresser for the first time in their lives. "I don't know what to do with all this space," David said with a big grin. He was looking into one of the empty drawers of their old dresser, which a losing toss of a coin had awarded him. Neither dresser mattered to Xander, but after he ended up with the one from their new house, he wondered if his things would disappear from any of the drawers. He imagined a pile of boxers suddenly appearing in someone's kitchen counter one day. Each boy would also get his own night table and bedside lamp. It was almost like having your own room, but not. Dad's music pounded from the master bedroom. Most of the lyrics and high notes didn't make it as far as the brothers' bedroom, but the bass thumped on the floors and off the walls. Xander opened a box full of rolled posters and began sorting through them. He selected one and flattened it against the wall above his bed. The edges were torn, the tips of the corners lost long ago. It was a lithograph of a tiled mosaic hanging in Naples Museo Archeologico Nazionale that featured the scene of Alexander the Great at the Battle of Issus. Xander had been named for the ancient Greek king of Macedon. It was a family tradition, dating as far back as anyone could remember, to name king children after great kings and queens. Fortunately, the practice did not extend to marrying people with royal names. That would really crimp the pursuits of love. Still, Mom insisted there was a Queen Gertrude. Dad said only in Shakespeare's Hamlet, and that it didn't count. The Alexander in the poster had long sideburns down to his jawline. The guy would have been hip today, 2,300 years after his death. Xander touched his own face. He could not grow sideburns yet, just a bit of peach fuzz, and as soon as he could, he would. So what do you think? He asked David, who had settled on the floor with his PSP and glanced up at the poster. Aren't you sick of looking at that? I am. Xander let the poster spin back into a roll, and he said, just because you don't put up the one Mom and Dad gave you. Michelangelo's, David? That guy's naked. It's art. David made a disgusting sound with his lips. I'll find a different poster of King David, thank you very much. Footsteps in the hallway drew their attention, the clomping boots of the moving men. When they'd arrived, all they wanted to do was grumble about having to haul the stuff through the woods to the house. Then Dad had slipped each one of them some extra cash, and that was that. This one, someone said. Another answered, no, down here. She said by the bedroom. The man came into view carrying a box. He opened the linen closet door and stepped in to slide the box into one of the shelves. Another mover, coming up behind, bumped the door and it swung shut. David gasped. The door didn't latch, however, and the second man kicked it open with his boot. The first man turned in the closet and took the box from his colleague. The second man looked at them. Hey, boys. Xander and David were too stunned to answer. The men gave them a puzzled look, but both movers pushed the closet door shut and clomped away. David turned from the open dresser drawer to stare open-mouthed at Xander, who returned the expression. And David said, Xander nodded. And another thing. And he walked to the linen closet door. David moved up behind him. Xander opened it. 2 boxes inside. It must only work with people. It's a good thing we'd all lose our towels. Yeah, we'd get them back dirty, Xander said, along with some kids' school books. When they shut the door, they jumped. Dad was standing there. He had turned down the music, and they hadn't even noticed. How you guys doing? Dad asked. Oh, good, Xander said, a little too quickly. Fine, David said in a higher Toria voice he got when he was a bit scared or nervous. Dad looked past them into their room. Getting settled in there? Yeah, getting there, Xander said, and then went back to his room. David and Dad followed. Xander sat on his bare mattress. David sat on his, facing Xander. So what do you guys think? Dad asked. Is this going to work? Xander looked around the room appreciatively. It's super cool. Yeah, David agreed. So, Dad looking from son to son, are you going to stay here, or should we stay here tonight? Really? David said, hopping up. Dad said, if we can get the lights back on, and he looked at his watch. An electrician should be here any time now. All right, David said. Xander smiled his agreement, and Dad scanned the floor near the walls. You haven't seen any mice up here, have you? Xander shook his head. Did you catch some? Yeah, a couple in the kitchen cabinets, and he put his finger to his lips in a hushed gesture. Don't tell your mother. What can I see? David asked. Next time, buddy. David furrowed his brow. Do they have a mouse problem at the school? Xander kicked his leg and then stood to make it look like it was an accident. I don't know, Dad asked. Why? Before David could complete the task of wedging his foot into his mouth, Xander said, I was telling him that rodents are everywhere here in Hicksville, not just old houses. Yep, Dad agreed. They're everywhere. He turned to leave them then and stopped at the door. Mom's got the boxes of sheets and blankets in our room. Come and get some. I'll be right there, Xander told him. When he was gone, Xander punched David in the arm. You idiot. David frowned. I'm not used to secrets. Everybody has secrets, Xander said, irritated. He brushed past David on his way out the door. Over his shoulder, he said, even this house. Mom was sitting on her bed when Xander looked in. She was examining the pages of a photo album that was open beside her. With her hair falling over her face, he thought at first she was crying. And he rapped gently on the master bedroom door. He was relieved to see a beaming smile when she stood up. Hey, Xander, come in. And she patted a clean spot on the bed. Boxes and items wrapped in newspaper covered the rest. I came for our sheets and blankets, he said. Dad said you had a box. Oh, sit with your mom a sec, will ya? On the way over, he glanced around. Wow, this is big, he said. Yeah, it needs some work. And she was talking about the old wallpaper, stained and hopelessly outdated. I like it, though. When he sat, she tapped a picture in the album. Do you remember this? Xander was about 6 years old, standing next to Mickey Mouse in front of Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland. Xander, his face was twisted in terror, his face glistening with tears. His mouth was open so wide you could almost see the little hanging thing at the back of his throat. Uvula, he thought it was called. What made it worse was David, 3 years old, big, happy grin, holding Mickey's white gloved hand. Xander frowned. You made me stand next to him? I thought it was creepy. He thought about it. David was too young to know better, that's all. She smiled, closed the book. She touched his hand. I want to show you something. And she stood and went to a bookcase where half a dozen ceramic figurines had been unwrapped and were on display. She elected one and returned to the bed. She rotated it in her hands. It was chipped and faded ceramic rooster about a foot high. He knew it meant a lot to her. Nana gave you that when she died, he said. Cancer had taken his grandmother when Xander was just 2. He sometimes thought he remembered her face, but he couldn't be sure. Mom nodded, and her mother gave it to her. She brought it over from Portugal when she immigrated to the United States. She used to say it was the only thing they had left from the old country, except our blood. She pushed her fingers into a hole at the base of the rooster and pulled something out. It was a fat roll of dollar bills. The outside one was a 20. Mom, he said in a hoarse whisper. She held up the roll and she said, it was going to be a surprise, but this move has been so hard on you. It's for your car. My car? It's not that much yet, and you'll have to chip in, but maybe by the time you're 16. Well, but how? You know we don't have a lot of extra money. When you were born, your father and I decided I'd quit my job and be a full-time mom. That made things tight, but her eyes scanned his face. It was the right decision. Last year, when you started talking about a car, I realized we weren't ready for something like that. The car, the gas, the insurance. She shook her head. I started putting a little aside every month. I cut more coupons, didn't go to the hair salon so much. Mom, he didn't even know what to say. It added up though, she said, looking at the wad of cash. She seemed to be amazed by its size, as Xander was. How much is it? And a pang of guilt rippled through him for even asking. Almost $2,000, but I hope we'll have more money by the time you're 16 in January. $2,000? He leaped over the album and threw his arms around her neck. Thank you. Now, Xander, you have to contribute. I only meant to. I will. I'll get a job as soon as I can. Your bedding is right here. David's too, she indicated the box on her bed. Unable to stifle his grin, he stood up and picked it up. Thank you, he whispered again. Chapter 21, Saturday, 2:02 a.m. or 12:02 a.m. The bulbs in the bathroom emitted only a dim yellowish glow. Better than nothing, Xander thought, standing in front of the toilet bowl in only his boxers. The electrician had kept the power off in some parts of the house. The basement, the library, the far hallway on the second floor. He'd explained that some wiring and fixtures needed replacing first. He flushed. The toilet shook and rattled like an excited dog at the end of a short leash. The water in the bowl disappeared in a loud whoosh. It filled again with a choking, gurgling sound that made Xander believe stepping into the woods to relieve himself would prove a better experience. At the sink, he turned on the faucet. Water did not immediately come out. Rather, the faucet sputtered and spat. A trickle of water followed, slowly building to a steady flow. He splashed it onto his face and looked at himself in the murky mirror. His hair was a mess, but he didn't look as tired as he felt. He had tried to sleep, but found himself watching the shadows of branches and leaves play across the ceiling in the moonlight. Finally, he tossed his bedding aside and gotten up. His clock had read 11:57. He was glad his mother had put a nightlight in the hallway. He might have never found the bathroom without it. He dried his face on his hand towel, relishing its familiarity. Living out of a motel room wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it definitely wasn't home. Neither was their new house yet. Still, as their things from Pasadena started to settle into their new locations, Xander realized these things, as much as his family, would help change that. When Xander opened the bathroom door, David was there, clad only in pajama bottoms. I couldn't sleep, he said. It's a new place, Xander said. And then something fell over in the corridor. The boys spun around towards the noise. Boxes were stacked at intervals all the way past the landing to their parents' bedroom. Another nightlight glowed at the far end, making the boxes black and their square edges sharply defined. Dad had made a point of telling his kids and the movers to place the boxes against only one wall. That would keep half of the hallway open to walk. Now, a box lay in that path just beyond the landing. Xander? David whispered. He stepped back into his brother. Xander whispered, It's just a box. Someone didn't stack it right. Another sound reached them, a scraping sound that seemed to come from the entryway. David pushed back even further into Xander. Get off my foot, Xander whispered, and David didn't budge. Maybe it's Dad. In the dark, David said. Xander thought about the way sounds couldn't be trusted in the house. Whatever had made that noise could be anywhere. That made him spin around to look the other direction towards the bedroom. David jumped. What? And he grabbed Xander's hand. Nothing. Just looking. A door thunked shut. Somewhere on the first floor, maybe? Xander took a step towards their bedroom. Wait here, he said, and he tried to shake him loose, but David was having none of it. No way, David said. Well, then you go. The flashlights are on your dresser. No way, he repeated. Turn on the hall light. I don't know where the switch is. All right, David said. Stay here. David released his hand and walked to the bedroom. He looked back every second step. He could have been swimming, turning his head regularly to breathe. He hesitated outside the bedroom and then reached his hand around the frame to flip on the light. Moments later, Xander saw the two flashlights come on and shine against the linen closet door. When David emerged, Xander asked, Is the switch down there? The beams flashed around. I don't see it, David said. He hurried to Xander and handed him one of the lights. They moved down the hall towards the landing. Toria's door was open. A nightlight revealed her sleeping in bed. David cast his light into the room. Xander pushed his hand down. Don't wake her, he whispered. At the landing, they leaned on the banister. Xander panned his light over the base of the stairs, the few feet of dining room visible to him, and the front door. David shined his light directly below onto the corridor leading to the kitchen. It's like we're in a guard tower. Shh. Xander's beam caught the chandelier. 1,000 sparkles of white and blue light danced on the walls. Whoa, David said, and he added his light to Xander's. A galaxy of stars exploded around them, swirling over the walls and their faces. Despite their unease, they shared a smile. And then David's light fell from his hand, and it tumbled end over end until it crashed on the floor way below and blinked out. Day? Xander said and stopped. His brother stared wildly at something past Xander. David reached out. He found the flesh of Xander's arm and squeezed. Xander hissed in pain. He looked over his shoulder, down the hallway. Where the corridor made a 90-degree turn towards the back of the house, a figure stood. Just like the boxes, it was backlit by the nightlight. He could make out no features. Whatever it was, appeared huge, but could have been a trick of the light. Dad? He said. The figure swayed. It seemed to shift its weight from one foot to the other. Its arms became more distinct, muscular, and massive. That's not Dad, whispered David. Xander turned to swing his flashlight around. At the same time, David grabbed for it. It flipped out of Xander's hand, and he fumbled for it, caught it, and flashed its beam down the hallway. The light captured a flash of shoulder, a foot, as a person disappeared beyond the corridor's bend. David's other hand shot out, and he sank both sets of fingers into Xander's bare torso. What was that? David said. Come on, Xander said, and he moved towards the spot where the figure had disappeared. No, wait, Xander! David was right on his heels. Don't you want to know? Xander whispered. Not like this. Let's wake Dad. Xander, wait. They were approaching their parents' bedroom on the left. It was a wonder Dad wasn't already bolting out to investigate. He suspected the noise had rippled away from their sleeping parents, whether the house had randomly kept Mom and Dad from hearing the sounds or had done it purposefully. Xander could not guess. He hoped it was not intentional. In any event, he had the opportunity now to burst in and get their help. He pulled up beside their door. The shaking flashlight beam betrayed his nerves. He braced himself and turned to David. We have to look ourselves first, he whispered. We're right behind him. It may be our only chance to figure out what's going on. What's going on is somebody broke into our house. How'd he get in? We were here. Where was he when we searched? He tried another tactic. Look, if it's a false alarm, Dad's going to think we're crazy. False alarm? David said between clenched teeth. Didn't you see him? Well, that doesn't mean he's there now. David knew as well as Xander did that the bend in the hallway led only to the servants' quarters. David said, where could he have gone? The house day. It doesn't even make sense. Then what are we doing living in it? And he kept looking past Xander to the bend, so Xander didn't have to. Xander held up his index finger to his mouth. Shh, he whispered. Do you hear that? Somewhere outside, a dog was howling. For some reason, that bothered Xander even more than seeing an intruder. He said, okay, listen, if we're attacked, we just go crashing into Mom and Dad's room. Sound good? Let's just take a look and see what we see. Just a look. David reached past a box and picked up a shower curtain rod. He had a two-handed grip on it, shook it to test its weight and balance. Okay, he said, let's do it. Chapter 22, Saturday, 12:20 a.m. Xander and David followed the flashlight beam around the corner. It found the closed guest room door, and Xander held it there. Was it closed before? He asked. I don't know. Being closed was worse. It meant opening it to who knew what. Stepping nearer, he expected the door to swing open and the man with the big feet to charge out. The backsplash of light filled the hallway. Their own shadows seemed to dance around them. David was near enough for Xander to feel his breath on his back. He glanced back at his brother. Big eyes, tight lips. He held the shower curtain rod straight up, ready to bring it down hard on any head he didn't recognize. Xander reached for the door handle. He turned it slowly, listening to the metal inside grinding against itself. The latch disengaged from the receptacle in the frame. He pushed. A musty odor drifted out. He pointed the flashlight at the black breach. It illuminated a thin strip of hardwood floor, a slice of furniture deeper inside. He debated kicking at the door and then decided to simply push it fully open. Extending his arm, he hoped nothing reached through and grabbed him. David tapped his shoulder. Xander did not want to turn his attention from the partially open door. What is it? He whispered. Look. Now? Instead of answering, David tapped him again. Xander looked, saw him nod to the other side. Xander swiveled his head around that way. On the back wall where the hall ended, a thick shadow, straight as a ruler, ran from floor to ceiling. He turned the flashlight beam towards it. Part of the wall was canted out, open like a door that had not closed fully. The wall had been paneled in vertical planks of wood. The opening matched where two planks met, which explained why they had not spotted the secret door before. Xander pulled the guest room door closed. He no longer thought anyone occupied the room, but he didn't want to make it easy for someone to sneak up on them if he were wrong. He tiptoed to the movable wall, and before he could get his fingers to the edge, David reached out and pushed it shut. It clicked and remained flush with the rest of the wall. Day, he whispered. What if we can't get it open again? We don't know where the... David gave the wall a quick push, and it popped open a crack. Xander scowled at him. Good thing. And he pulled at the edge. It swung open towards them easily, silently. He reversed a step, bumped into David, and then pushed him backwards. The flashlight picked up another wall several yards beyond the fake one. He moved into the opening. A closed door was set in the second wall. A sheet of metal had been riveted to it, as if to strengthen it. Xander approached it, feeling David cling to him like a wet leaf. Check it out, he said quietly. Hanging from the bright metal hasp attached to the door was a heavy padlock. Dangling with the lock was the portion of the hasp that had been screwed to the door frame. It had been ripped out, broken when the door was forced open. Splinters of wood lay on the baseboard, and a screw not far away. It looks new, David said. Xander turned the handle and pulled the door open. Stairs ascended to the floor above, but he and David had already found the attic entrance on the other side of the house. He recalled how small the attic had been, how he had assumed it was because of the shape of the roof. Now he thought of another reason. There were two attics. He didn't like it. This was right out of a Goosebumps story. Snoopy visitors would find the stairs to the attic, go up, and, well, what happened to them wasn't pretty. Xander's light revealed nothing at the top of the flight. The landing was deep enough to mask any door or wall that might be at the top. David was peering around Xander, pressing his chest against Xander's back. Xander could feel the boy's racing heart, and more. He was shivering as violently as a person who'd fallen through a lake's frozen surface. Xander stepped back and closed the metal-skinned door. He took in his brother's frightened face, wondered how much of it mirrored his own expression. He had read somewhere that bravery is not the absence of fear, but the forging ahead despite being afraid. David was certainly afraid, but he'd seen his brother's bravery too many times to assume he wanted to end their adventure here and now. "Are you okay?" he asked. David nodded and actually bent his lips into a smile of sorts. Your call. We go up now, or we wait until tomorrow and get Dad's help if you want." David stared at the door and considered his options. His heartbeat continued to pound furiously against Xander's back. At length, he whispered, "What I said before. Let's do it." Xander felt himself shiver. It was more internal than David's vibrating goosebumps, but a sign of his fear, all the same. Maybe he had been counting on David to vote them off this island, to send them home, back to bed. Perhaps his brother's fear was contagious. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, he reminded himself. He just wished he had something like David's curtain rod to wield. A bat would be nice. So would an M16. And he didn't much like the idea that he was almost naked, except for his boxers. Going into battle required a uniform, didn't it? I mean, at least clothes. Did he say battle? No, not battle. Not just battle. Just checking out a new place in their home. That's all. Yeah, a new place behind a fake wall and a door with a broken lock where some huge dude is probably waiting to ambush you. Stop it, he scolded himself. Are you going to do this or not? David, right behind him, had said, "Let's do this." How could Xander go back now? He'd never live it down. He pulled open the door again, flashed the light up the stairs. Nothing lurked at the top, at least that he could see. He passed through the threshold and then mounted the first step, the second, and then the third. David stayed one step below him. Another step. A wall came into view just past the upper landing. Up to step number, he'd forgotten. It didn't even matter. David kept a hand on Xander's hip. He was so close. Xander felt he was giving his brother a piggyback ride. He stepped on the landing. Set at a 90-degree angle from the staircase was a long, dark corridor. David edged up behind him, and then he said, "Xander, look." On the left wall was an old-fashioned light switch, copper faceplate through which two push buttons, one over the other, protruded. The upper button was depressed, almost flush to its faceplate. The bottom button stuck out half-inch further. Xander pushed this one, which caused the top button to pop out, teeter-totter style. The corridor lit up, illuminated by lights in the ceiling, as well as the wall-mounted lamps, spaced at even intervals on both long walls. The hallway wasn't straight. It bent slightly this way and then that way, kind of like a snake. It never curved enough to block the far end from view, and its length puzzled Xander. It seemed longer than the house itself, which was clearly impossible. He wondered if the wall on the far end was mirrored, giving the hallway its extended appearance. The floor was hardwood, and as was the rest of the house, but the old-fashioned carpet, red with an intricate black pattern, ran the length of the corridor. The bottom third of the walls was wainscoted in squares of dark wood. Wallpaper covered the upper portion, vertical stripes of old vines and leaves over an ivory background. Doors lined both sides. They were staggered, so no one door faced another. Their handles glinted dully in the light. "Holy cow," David whispered. "What is it?" "I don't know. It looks like a hotel," David said. "A hotel designed by Dr. Seuss, maybe," Xander added. "Do you think the guy we saw is in one of these rooms?" The figure. Xander's nerves were coiled on the razor edge between fight and flight. The figure had become symbolic of anything this house could throw at him, but David had kept the threat focused. It was not a row of doors that could harm them. It was what could come out of one of those doors. "Well," Xander answered, taking a tentative step into the hallway, "there's only one way to find out." Okay, guys, I'm stopping there. This book is awesome.